Hey, what's up, guys? Hey, it's always good to be back with you today. I wanted to talk with you about something that is somewhat important when you start looking into the history of these games and of attempts to simulate baseball. We'll talk more about the specifics as to why this is important, but I do think that it's important to talk about this particular subject because I think a lot of us are not aware of this. In fact, when I started looking into this myself, I wasn't aware of it at first. So the thing I'm talking about is statistics, and not just the availability of statistics today, but rather the historical availability of baseball statistics, which is something that we might not think about a lot. It's easy for those of us who grew up sometime in, say, the 1990s, even late 80s or so, to assume that baseball statistics have always been there, and it's always been really easy to access, and that there's never been any problem with getting access to that. That is not true. And in fact, when you start looking backwards in history and you start asking questions about, like, how did so-and-so, how was he able to do XYZ, you'll start noticing that the statistics are not quite as easily attainable as you once thought. So we're going to take a real quick look here at just a sample. This is from the Spalding Baseball Guide for 1930, which you can find here at the Library of Congress. This is the way that's presented, right? This is not the best way to present this guide. It's sort of like every single page is given a different image. If you go over to PDF, that won't give you like a view of the full PDF of the issue, right? This is a complaint that I have. It'll give you a PDF, but it doesn't even give me that when I right-click on it. Here you go. But the PDF ends up being an attempt to transcribe the words that are in the publication, and it doesn't work. It's awful, and it's missing all the photos and stuff. I don't know why anybody in their right mind would want that. This is ridiculous, but especially when you consider what kind of publication this is. We're going to go take a look at this, and I already have things open up, so we always start off with a review of the season and all of this stuff. But what we're really interested in looking at is we're interested in looking at this page right here, National League Averages page. And the reason why we're interested in looking at this, and of course I opened up the wrong page, is because we want to know what sort of information would have been available to somebody creating a game like National Pastime, for example, in 1929. Now, I can see that my face is covering some of this stuff. We'll zoom in a little bit here so you can see what we're looking at. So the National League Averages page starts off with the championship winners in previous years, which gives you their won-loss percentages. Then when we look at the batting records, you'll notice at first that it is arranged by percentage. That is the way that Mr. Al Munro Elias of New York did it. This is Elias of the Elias Sports Bureau. He is the one who compiled these statistics. He includes some things that are important, like whether the batter was right or left-handed, the number of games and number of at-bats. And what do we have here? Runs, hits, doubles, triples, home runs, sacrifice hits, and stolen bases. That's it. That's all you've got, right? So if you're looking for something outside of this, if you're interested in how many double plays did the guy ground into, it's not here. If you're looking at how many times the guy struck out or how many guys the time walked, it's not here, right? You're so limited in terms of what you can do that there's a question as to whether these statistics for the modern sophisticated sabermetrician would be worth anything at all. Now, luckily for us, there is a secondary page that we're also printed here, but not for every player, right? You see the players listed here. I'm not quite sure what the criteria was to be listed on this particular page, but this is not every single player that was playing at the time. For specific players, there was the slugging percentage, RBI total, as well as walks, strikeouts, and times hit by pitcher, right? And so you can see here that we have a certain number of RBIs for like Rogers Hornsby in 1929, and then the number of times he walked and struck out, and then he was hit by a pitcher once. That's a little bit better if we're talking about like what could we do, if we were trying to get these statistics and make a game with them. But it's not perfect, right? So I'll show you something else here, right? The American League statistics at the time. The reason why I'm showing you these is because these are a little bit different. This is here on image 158. This is page 152 of the guide. The American League statistics are different. They're the same statistics except the caught stealing column is included. Now, we can go take another look over here, and I probably should have done this before I prepared this, just to make sure that there's no other things that the American League hitters are given as a statistic. But if you look back on some of these games, here we go, if you look back on some of these games that were created in those days, one of the things that you will notice is that caught stealing was not really a thing. And the reason why is because it didn't exist for everybody, right? We go to the National League and there's no caught stealing data. Now, you can only use the data that you have, right? You can't like come up with it. You can't make it up or whatever, right? You have to use kind of what you're given. It's like you're a kid at dinner. You got to eat what you're given, right? When we look over here to the American League other statistics, again, we have walks, hit by pitch, RBIs, and strikeouts, and that's it. They didn't even do the slugging percentage, right? So when you compare that to this, here you have strikeouts, walks, and hit by pitch, which is what we care about. I mean, here, I know it's the official National League guide, but this is, very, very abbreviated. Now, it's possible if you were going to look at the Reach guide, it would give you a little bit more information, but I doubt it would be much more. There's another thing, there are actually two other things I want to show you here. I can't right-click to get to that quite yet. This is from the article I've published already. We're going to go take a look at what the Sporting News would publish. So day by day, this is from the October 2nd, 1930 issue of the Sporting News. You can see there's really not a lot of information. I talked about this before when I was talking about what year National Pastime was based on, and you can see the problem here, right? If you're looking day by day, you're getting at-bats, runs, hits, and RBIs. That's it, right, in terms of the statistics that were published. It's not enough to make a game on. Now, we can look further on, and this is from, December 4th, 1930. This issue of the Sporting News had only the National League statistics, and it had hits, doubles, triples, home runs, sacrifice hits, and stolen bases. And that's it. Again, still no caught stealing statistics if you're interested in that. Now, there were, for players who batted in 10 or more runs, interesting that they were looking for guys with only 10 or more RBIs. Within the paper, they would also give the number of walks and strikeouts and hit by pitchers. So you can do this for some players. But again, if you're trying to make up your big season where you card everybody, you just can't do it. You cannot do it. Physically, it will not happen. You will not be able to card everybody, right? And fielding statistics are even harder to come by. We're going down until the, those were the American League stats. Here are the National League stats in the Sporting News. And you can see, again, there's no caught stealing at all. And so, I mean, if that's where you're using, you're not going to have a great time. You could say, what about the daily newspapers? This is from the Chicago Tribune. These are the American League averages. It has less information than you think. It had runs, hits, home runs, stolen bases. Aha, you say, well, maybe somebody making a game like this, maybe they could have done the stats themselves. And now you're going to see all the spoilers. Maybe they could have done the stats themselves from the box scores. No, they couldn't have. I'm going to show you this. This comes from this is going to be published, by the way, by the time you see this video. I'm trying to figure this out because I'm doing this ahead of time. This comes from a blog post I have not finished yet. I have not published yet. We're going to look at a single game from 1930. I just chose this at random, September 26, 1930. I actually chose this because the Sporting News box score is somewhat readable. Somewhat. Not really. If it doesn't look so good on your screen, don't worry. It doesn't look good on my screen either. But you can kind of see this, and what you'll notice here is that you have at-bats, runs, hits, putouts, which is called O. That's the old-fashioned way of referring to this, and assists for every single player. Here you have a listing of errors, and they would put it down here. 2 base hits, 3 base hits, home runs. You do have power hits for each player. Double play is listed, but only by the fielder making the double play, English, Blair, and Kelly, not by the batter. And then comes bases and balls off of each pitcher and struck out by each pitcher, right? And then there are hits off of each pitcher, there are wild pitches, and so on and so forth. That is the standard box score template for those days. Want to see this? So I've scrolled over to this already. This is from the Chicago Tribune account of the same game, and it's exactly the same statistics. It's 100% the same. There is no difference. This is 100% the same. And there is still no information about batter strikeouts or batter walks. That was proprietary data that only the Elias Sports Bureau had access to. There's no information about caught stealing. That was proprietary data that only the Elias Sports Bureau had access to at that time. If you're wondering why we do Project Retrosheet, this is the reason why. It's because of this thing that's missing, right? Let's look at this again. This is in the Cincinnati Enquirer, and here is the exact same thing, the exact same information. And again, you cannot see batters base on balls or batter struck out or batter grounded into double play. It just wasn't a thing. You would say, well, let's look at the New York Times. That was the paper of record, and here's the box score. It's the exact same thing. There's a reason why I'm saying this. The reason why I'm saying this is because if you were going to make your own game If you were in, I don't know, say 1930 or early 1931 making your own game, you're not going to be able to use the box score to get that information. It has to come really from a baseball guide. I don't see any other way you're going to be able to do this, right? Unless you had access to every play-by-play account of every game, you're not going to get it. Nobody was keeping track of the strikeouts and walks per batter. If we look at your game and we see that the strikeouts and walks per batter are right on, then we have a problem, because you have to have used the actual baseball guide. There's no other source for this information. Additionally, if you're playing with certain games and the double plays are off, the reason why is because there was no statistics on the grounded into double plays for hitters. We forget about this stuff. A lot of us were not alive when all this stuff came around, and there is no good place to find this information about when one stat or the other started out. I read the book by Alan Schwartz. It doesn't have this granular detail of information. I went on to Wikipedia. It's not there. I went on to Baseball Reference. It's not there, right? So there's a history behind this stuff that people don't talk about because we're too busy trying to go back and retrace it. This is something to keep in mind. A lot of this information is there. It's in old newspapers and it's in old accounts, but we have to go through and we have to dig it up. This is why I support Project RetroSheet, and I support also anybody who does anything that is not proprietary, which is what destroys the use of these statistics, but rather things that are open source. This should be open source, and we should be open with each other about this. There you go. That's my take on this. I look forward to all of your content, your comments, and other insights you might have. I'll talk to you later. Bye.